Well, it's time for chapter 3. And I appreciate you guys for sticking with me. This chapter is going to take a little bit longer for me to cover than the others, but chapter 4 is going to be pretty short. And even if this chapter is going to take a little longer to get through, it's actually the most interesting one to me and gave me the most insights. All right, so chapter 3 is all about the practical skill set that you need to teach in the problem posing education model that Freire introduced to us in chapter 2. And the skill is dialogue. Wow. Why? What is so important about dialogue? Well, it is through this dialogical teaching style that you are able to create and maintain this belief that it is absolutely necessary to always be criticizing and critiquing any facts that would constrain you to one reality. Okay, but how? How does dialogue create this logical framework that he just explained is necessary in chapter 2? So I am going to let Freire explain it to you himself. For this part of the video, I am actually going to read to you a portion of this chapter. And I do think it's important to do this because I need you to hear his pretty words that would convince you that you are love and that anyone who opposes you is not human. So forgive me for some longer quotes now, but I am going to read and pause to comment as I go. All right, from page 88. Human existence cannot be silent, nor can it be nourished by false words, but only by true words, with which men and women transform the world. Okay, well, first of all, that sentence is hypocritical because he's just been arguing that there's no such thing as absolute truth. And truth is simply the state of the world as you create it to be. So what true words is he talking about? Anyways, to exist humanly is to name the world, to change it. Once named, the world in its turn reappears to the namers as a problem and requires of them a new naming. Human beings are not built in silence, but in word, in work, in action reflection. Okay, does that sound kind of familiar to you? Wasn't Adam told to name the animals? Haven't we humans been mandated by God to subdue the earth and have dominion over it? But what is he saying here? He uses similar words, but he's saying that we have to name and rename the world in our image. Since truth is whatever you have named truth, every generation must rename their truth so that you are a subject and not an object from chapter 2, remember? Anyway, so the world presents itself to you and requires of you a new naming. But while to say the true word, which is work, which is praxis, is to transform the world, saying that word is not the privilege of some few persons, but the right of everyone. Consequently, no one can say a true word alone, nor can she say it for another, in a prescriptive act which robs others of their words. So what's he saying? Everyone has the right to speak. Everyone has the right to participate, to transform the world. No one can say a true word alone. Basically, if you say anything is just true or fact, you are robbing others of their right to speak, which is to rob them of their right to name or transform the world, which is to rob them of their right to participate in the process of humanization, which is to take away their humanity. Dialogue is the encounter between men mediated by the world in order to name the world. Hence, dialogue cannot occur between those who want to name the world and those who do not wish this naming, between those who deny others the right to speak their word and those whose right to speak has been denied them. So we're going to pause here. Did you get that? Dialogue is the encounter of people coming together to name the world, to each speak their truth. So you who would believe that there is such thing as established fact or absolute truth cannot dialogue. It's literally not possible to dialogue with you. Those who have denied their primordial right to speak their word must first reclaim this right and prevent the continuation of this dehumanizing aggression. Their primordial right to speak their word. You see how they would use freedom of speech against you? They would say it is their inalienable right to speak. They would say that if you dare think that you have the truth, you are the one violating their inalienable rights, thus dehumanizing them. All right, so we're going to skip down a little bit because honestly, he's pretty redundant. So here we go. Because dialogue is an encounter among women and men who name the world, it must not be a situation where some name on behalf of others. It is an act of creation. It must not serve as a crafty instrument for the domination of one person by another. The domination implicit in dialogue is that of the world. By the dialoguers, it is conquest of the world for the liberation of humankind. Okay, so they're trying to take over the world. But if you disagree and try to persuade them of their perspective through dialogue, oh, ho ho, you are crafty. You're trying to dominate them. He just said that it's only dialogue if it's an encounter among men and women who come together to name the world. So if you're someone on the other side of the aisle and say, okay, you like dialogue, right? Let's dialogue. Let's talk about our differences and beliefs. Oh, no, you are not actually interested in dialogue. You want to force your ideas onto me. I don't even need to entertain your arguments because you refuse to participate in true dialogue. Dialogue cannot exist, however, in the absence of a profound love for the world and for people. The naming of the world, which is an act of creation and recreation, is not possible if it is not infused with love. Love is at the same time the foundation of dialogue and dialogue itself. It is thus necessarily the task of responsible subjects and cannot exist in a relation of domination. Translation: love is dialogue, and dialogue is love. Also, any relationship that is hierarchical in any way is a form of domination, and thus cannot be love. And that includes parent-children relationships and teacher-student relationships. They have to be filled with dialogue of what is your truth and what is my truth, or they don't love you. And if you're against that, you are against love. And since it's not possible for dialogue to exist without love, dialogue is proof of love. I mean, forget needing to prove that because trust me, bro, right? Domination reveals the pathology of love, sadism in the dominator, and masochism in the dominated. Because love is an act of courage, not of fear, love is commitment to others. No matter where the oppressed are found, the act of love is commitment to their cause, the cause of liberation. And this commitment, because it is loving, is dialogical. Translation: it is sick and twisted to say that love dominates in any way. Therefore, love is to commit to the cause of the oppressed. Commitment is proof of love, and therefore, dialogue will be present. So, do you see the problem? Anytime you say, but this is just fact, you are a sadist, an oppressor, and anyone who would agree with you is giving himself away that he is actually a pussy little masochist. All right, so thank you for sticking with all of that reading, and I've only got a few more short quotes coming up. Freire continues to argue that current society is hierarchical, meaning that dialogue is suppressed because those in power want to stay in power. And that's why true freedom isn't possible unless every single person in society is equal, which is why Freire is a huge communist and thinks anything other than communism is obviously not love. And he explains that engaging in his definition of dialogue is true humility because, and I quote, there are neither utter ignoramuses nor perfect sages. There are only people who are attempting together to learn more than they now know. He further explains that dialogue proves your faith in humanity. Again, I quote, founding itself upon love, humility, faith, dialogue becomes a horizontal relationship of which mutual trust between the dialoguers is the logical consequence. It would be a contradiction in terms if dialogue, loving, humble, and full of faith, did not produce this climate of mutual trust, which leads the dialoguers into ever closer partnership in the naming of the world. And this explains the logic behind someone who would look at the horrifying effects of communism on a nation and say, obviously, they didn't do it right because true dialogue requires love, humility, and faith. And also, true dialogue engages in critical thinking, which to Freire means to perceive reality as process, as transformation rather than as a static entity. Or as Kamala Harris puts it, to imagine what can be unburdened by what has been. This is why for you to notice or be concerned by any kind of pattern such as crime rates is racist and bigoted and backward because you are being held back by what has been. Okay, that was a lot of reading and a lot of quotes, but I needed you to understand that anytime you hear some woke educator wanting to engage in dialogue, it is pregnant with meaning. You will read innocent sounding curriculum descriptions that say they want to teach your child social emotional skills so that they can dialogue and collaborate with their peers, so that they can engage in critical thinking in a space of psychological safety. You have to know those words don't mean what you think it means. So for the rest of this chapter, Freire is basically explaining what it looks like to apply this concept of dialogics to revolutionize the masses of any given cultural background. But why? Why is engaging in dialogue so powerfully successful in every cultural background? The key is in its simplicity. It is so incredibly simple. It is shocking how well it works because all you have to do is get your educators to constantly engage in dialogue and repeat how loving it is to engage in dialogue and repeat that you, as an educator, are also learning from the student as much as they are learning from you. And thus, both parties are engaging in the process of humanization and no one is being dehumanized. But you, as the educator, oh, well, you know better. You know that we are all being oppressed by our oppressor overlords, but not all your students realize it yet. So you have to engage in dialogue, almost like a therapist. When did you feel disrespected? By whom? How did that affect your life? Did you see any justice served? Don't you feel marginalized? Your goal is to find out what sort of injustices you and your students want to revolt against, and then you dig in and fan the flames. Freire calls it coming up with generative themes. And then you have to get the students to describe their limit situations, or in other words, specific obstacles that hold them back from overcoming those generative themes that you guys came up with. And of course, he makes this whole thing sound really intelligent with his big words. And that's it. But this is why it's not always easily noticeable, because the injustice that whatever riled up college students are fighting for at the time differs from nation to nation, culture to culture, and even city to city. For the Maoists, it was the landowners and educated people. And for the liberals, it's conservatives and white people. They fail to notice the exact same pattern is being played out using the exact same tactics. And they think you're crazy for drawing that comparison. They'll roll their eyes at your conspiracy theory when you point out that they're going down a dangerous path. And they say it's obviously not the same thing. We are fighting against systemic racism. We're the oppressed ones. You don't see us supporting the gassing of people in concentration camps. Yeah, look how well that's turning out. They're cutting it real close to the edge now. You have Ivy League schools supporting a terrorist organization because look at their society. It's obviously in worse condition. Therefore, it's obvious that they're the oppressed ones. They're just like us, poor, oppressed people. And therefore, we need to fight for them too. It's not the same thing. Now, if you would just stop oppressing other people, then we wouldn't have to put you in your place. And that's how they continue to think themselves virtuous, since the oppressors are the ones forcing their hand to defend themselves and others. I mean, come on. If you would just get with the program, I wouldn't have to burn down your store or pour paint on museum paintings. And if you would just stop driving your car, I wouldn't have to sit in the middle of the street, endangering my life for the good of the world. You see how effective this mindset is? It's so simple that the same logic can be applied over and over just about any situation and end up with the same conclusion of overthrowing whatever the next oppressor is. And because different people apply differing amounts of pain or importance to different situations, you get different factions of woke groups attacking each other, each group competing to be the most oppressed. It's just a logical framework. And once you've trained someone to think in this flow of logic, you've created a self-sustaining revolutionary, because it appeals to your nature and your desire to connect with people, to be understood and affirmed. It appeals to the underdog mentality. You see yourself in a David and Goliath situation. It appeals to human nature's hero complex. And maybe you don't think you're a hero. Well, how about this? It appeals to the kindness in your heart where you want to help someone else in need. It appeals to your reason, your desire to be understanding or the discerning one. And here's what's sobering. It appeals to your original identity as a child of God, to subdue and multiply, to empower and bring righteousness. It literally promises to open our eyes and make us wise. Where have we heard that before? Let's go there. Let's go there for a sec. Genesis 3:1-6. Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? Engaging in dialogue. And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Form your generative themes. Describe your limit situation. Then the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Introduce the oppressor. Don't you see? It's God who's keeping you from your next level breakthrough. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. It makes sense. It looks harmless. It'll make me wise. It's good for me. I want to be like God, and not in the narcissistic way where I think I'm a God. I want to be like my Father, my Creator. He created me in His image, and this will make me more like Him. And she adopted the logical framework and immediately went to share that same logical framework. I don't suppose Eve was trying to be the first social justice warrior. I don't suppose she was trying to be the first revolutionary. She was motivated by good intentions. You think, I would never do what climate protesters do. I would never protest in favor of a terrorist organization. Or you think, I would never loot and burn down stores. Okay, sure. I mean, maybe you came from a solid family, you're a law-abiding citizen, you love Jesus. So you wouldn't go that far. But we don't need to go that far. We just need to be a little bit deceived. And you'd be surprised how far unresolved resentment will bury itself into your life. Perhaps it's your pastor who's keeping you from your next promotion ministry. Perhaps it's your Sunday school teacher's fault that your child doesn't love Jesus anymore. Perhaps you're only the way you are because you've been traumatized by your parents. In experience, those things may be true, but as long as you have one reasonable offense, all I have to do is engage with you in dialogue, come up with a list of wrongs, what you think ought to be done about them, and fan the flames. And then I can use the same process for the person on the other side of the offense, and I can easily fan those flames. And before you know it, there's an irreparable rift between people. And we all know how contagious emotional rifts are because maybe the hurt didn't even happen directly to you, but so and so offended your mom. And well, nobody talks to your mom that way. And then your besties are like, oh my gosh, how could they? And then your kid is like, well, I guess so and so is actually a bad person. And you get the idea. I basically just summarized every church split ever. The point I'm trying to make is that your experiences may be real. The feelings may be real. The pain is real. But if you don't intentionally submit them under the blood of Jesus and actively relearn how to see yourself and everyone involved through the eyes of Christ, and you accidentally allow a little bit of victim mentality to stay in your life, then you will say to yourself that you are wiser and more discerning, all while operating out of a pain response. And you won't even notice that you're operating under the same logical framework as the ones you call woke, all while calling yourself discerning. The woke mindset isn't complicated. It isn't intellectual. It isn't deeply philosophical. Dialogue makes it sound like it is. Dialogue is simply exploiting human nature and is effective in every cultural background because it is the exact same tactic that was used in the garden. And goodness, I can go on and on about this topic and all the subtle places where it could be in your life and how easy it is to rationalize or even spiritualize our offenses and cause divisions that become contagious. But there is, in fact, a cure-all that is so simple that it often offends the intellect of people who are hurting or have experienced hurt. And it's forgiveness. But how can you forgive? How can you summon forgiveness from your heart if it's not there? It comes from trusting in the mercy and truth of God. The more we try to right our own wrongs, the more we escalate the situation. Because at what point can we say justice has been served? Reparations? How far back do we need to account for? I mean, Batman is cool and all, but I think we can all agree from experience that the broken window theory works better than vengeance. And if you don't know what the broken window theory is, it's worth looking up. It cleaned up New York once, it can do it again. Is that a broken window? Repair it. Is that graffiti? Paint it over. Begin to enforce. This is now a low crime neighborhood. Stand in righteousness and enforce your new identity. Has that subway been tagged again? Paint it again. Determined to paint it over as many times as it takes, just like you have to determine to paint your wounds over with the blood of Jesus as many times as it takes. Jesus came and died for the sins of the world and basically offers to paint over our canvas and start over. Oh, you've sinned? Paint it over with my blood. He sinned? Paint it over with my blood. You've sinned again? Paint it over with my blood. You see how this doesn't make any excuses for evil behaviors while offering a complete do-over, while enforcing righteousness, because blood has a price. So every time you apply the blood, you are repenting, acknowledging that I've crossed the line. That was wrong. Forgive me. I will turn again. You see, you're not given a license to sin, but you are actively enforcing your new identity as many times as it takes. And sometimes you have to walk out that forgiveness with baby steps. Nobody said it was going to be easy, but it's holy. Don't dialogue with your pain. And as much as I like the Batman movies, his policies don't work in real life, okay? Just saying. But thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to leave questions or comments below and dialogue together the way dialogue is actually meant to be used as an engage in civil discourse, okay? And don't at me, Batman fans, okay? I like Batman as a fictional character, but it's better to act like Gandalf or Faramir in real life, right?